Before we get to the story, take a second to give this video a like and subscribe. Your contribution to the development of the channel is invaluable. Thank you. I never imagined that uprooting my life could feel so liberating and terrifying at the same time. Leaving behind the familiar skyline of Chicago, I, Eriki Marshall, found myself stepping into the charming chaos of Fort Angel, a coastal haven that offered both mystery and promise. My first days in this town were saturated with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Each cobblestone, every weathered facade of the old mansions, whispered secrets of bygone eras while daring me to carve out my own story in their midst. The salty tang of the sea, mingled with the aroma of fresh rain, awakened something deep inside me, a promise of freedom that had long been suppressed by the relentless pace of my past life. I arrived on a brisk Saturday morning, the horizon painted in vibrant hues as the sun ascended. The town was already buzzing with its weekly flea market, a carnival of eclectic treasures, lively chatter, and faces that seemed to tell 1,000 untold tales. I wandered through the maze of stalls, my senses overwhelmed by the vibrant mix of antiquated curios and modern oddities. It was here, amidst the throng of locals and visitors, that I first sensed an undercurrent of intrigue. Just as I was absorbing the atmosphere, fate intervened in a way I hadn't anticipated. My trusted notebook, the repository of my most private reflections and dreams, vanished in an instant. Amid the crowd's ebb and flow, a shadowy figure had swiftly made off with it, leaving behind only a fleeting glimpse of dark eyes that spoke of untold secrets. That single shattering moment sent an electrifying jolt through me, an omen that my freshly minted life was about to fracture into unforeseen paths. The loss was not just physical. It felt like the wounding of my inner self. The notebook, a quiet chronicle of hopes and despairs, had held the power to transmute my scattered emotions into coherent purpose. Now, in its absence, I found myself suspended between vulnerability and the desire to reclaim control of my destiny. Even as I clung to the vision of a vibrant future, the ghost of that mysterious theft loomed large, hinting at unfinished business with a murky past I had never fully known. In the midst of this disarray, I couldn't help but notice the calm reliability of my husband, Brain. Even in the face of this bizarre incident, he exuded a steadfast presence, a rock in the surging tide of my newfound tumult. Yet I sensed a subtle disconnect between him and me, as though the layers of my aspirations were beginning to peel away, revealing a raw and rebellious heart waiting to be unleashed. As I took tentative steps further into Fort Angel's labyrinth of narrow alleys and storied houses, I felt both the thrill of new beginnings and the chill of imminent change. This was not just a physical relocation. It was the dawn of a chapter that promised to redefine everything I once believed about love, loyalty, and the price of freedom. The mansion's wine cellar buzzed with an undercurrent of creative energy that was as intoxicating as the vintage poured into delicate glasses. Every corner of the dimly lit space revealed clusters of people deeply engaged in fervent discussion. Poets, artists, freethinkers, and bohemians all gathered in a refined yet unrestrained atmosphere. I found myself drifting through the room, absorbing snippets of impassioned debates and eccentric anecdotes, when suddenly, my attention was captured by a man whose presence defied the ordinary. He introduced himself simply as Tyler, a relative of Brain, about whom I had heard only the vaguest mentions in hushed, almost reverent tones. There was something enigmatic in the way he carried himself. His eyes sparkled with a rebellious glint, and his speech flowed like a river of literary allusions and audacious ideas. As he moved from one small discussion group to another, his voice left a trail of questions and subtle provocations that were impossible to ignore. I recalled our earlier conversation that morning about escaping the constraints of the familiar, and now Tyler seemed to embody the antithesis of those limitations. While other guests recited lines from famous authors or quoted obscure artworks, Tyler wove references to modern art and subversive literature into his dialogue, challenging the very conventions our gathering sought to uphold. At one point, in the midst of a particularly spirited exchange about the role of art in society, he leaned in to whisper something that sent a shiver down my spine. His tone was low and provocative, hinting at a secret connection to my most private dreams, as if he alone had been privy to the forbidden chapters of my inner life. The remark, though veiled in metaphor, struck a nerve. I felt as if he was holding a mirror to my hidden aspirations, a mirror that revealed both the beauty and the darkness of desires I had long since kept behind tightly locked doors. His piercing gaze lingered on me just a heartbeat longer than necessary, silently questioning the very boundaries of my self-imposed limitations. In that moment, it wasn't just a conversation about art or philosophy. It was a challenge to the life I had constructed with such care, a suggestion that perhaps there was more to experience beyond the safe facade I maintained. Tyler's words resonated with a magnetic intensity. They hinted at experiences that defied social norms and illuminated the parts of me that ached for liberation. The room seemed to darken around us, even as the ambient lights flickered softly, as if conspiring with our clandestine exchange. I realized that his presence was no trivial coincidence. It was as if fate had played its hand, presenting me with an opportunity to question everything I once believed was fixed and immutable. Though the elegance of the wine cellar and the comfort of familiar faces lingered in the background, a bold and disruptive energy now pulsed at the forefront of my awareness. In that charged space, amid the swirl of half-whispered dialogues and the clink of wine glasses, I understood that Tyler was not merely a guest at this gathering. Instead, he emerged as a catalyst, one who was ready to upend the status quo and invite me to venture into a realm of previously unimagined possibilities. With every carefully chosen word and every subtle gesture, he beckoned me to explore uncharted territories of thought and desire, setting the stage for a confrontation with all that I had once held dear. The setting was a quiet university library that had transformed for the evening into an intimate sanctuary of literature and thought. Under the gentle glow of antique wall sconces and the ambient hum of whispered musings, rows of time-worn books bore silent witness to the passion for words filling the air. I had come to this literary gathering seeking solace and perhaps a brief reprieve from the disconcerting mysteries of Fort Angel, but fate had woven a more intricate tapestry for me that night. I found a secluded corner surrounded by shelves heavy with aged tomes and the faint aroma of parchment. It was here, in the dim interplay of light and shadow, that I noticed Tyler leaning casually against a carved wooden table. He had already shed the previous layers of boastful intellectual banter that characterized our earlier encounters and now appeared thoughtful and vulnerable. Our eyes met from across the room, and in that unspoken moment, everything seemed to pause. It was as if we had both stepped beyond the mask of civility into a realm where only raw, unfiltered emotion was allowed. Tyler approached me, his footsteps a soft cadence against the marble floor. "Iriki," he began, voice low and resonant. "Have you ever felt that your soul is caged in the routine of everyday life? That beneath the veneer of order, there's a wild spirit longing for liberation?" His question, simple yet laden with poetic weight, hit me like a bolt of lightning. It was not merely an inquiry about existential ennui, but a direct challenge to the life I had so carefully constructed. His words seemed to echo the secret desires that I had long buried deep within my heart. I hesitated only a moment before replying in a tone that betrayed both surprise and anticipation. "I believe there's a part of me that's always been restless," I confessed. "A part that dreams of breaking free, even if it means facing the unknown, risking everything for a taste of something real." Our conversation deepened quickly, evolving beyond scripted lines or fleeting pleasantries. We traded insights about lost loves, unsung passions, and unfulfilled potential. In that quiet library, surrounded by the wisdom of generations past, our words danced in a delicate balance between revelation and restraint. Tyler's voice softened as he recounted long-forgotten memories and shared intimate reflections about the societal expectations that had constrained him. His sincerity was palpable, stirring something profound within me, an awakening to truths I had long denied. Every syllable he uttered resonated like a call to arms against the mundane, inviting me to question the rigid boundaries of my own existence. With each shared secret and lingering glance, the invisible walls that had confined me began to crumble, replaced by a tangible, if dangerous, promise of transformation. For a moment, time stood still. The library's solemn silence bore witness to a spark, a subtle yet undeniable ignition of desire that hinted at both the beauty and peril of embracing one's innermost longings. In that intimate exchange, with the world of literature around us as our silent confidant, I realized that my carefully curated life was on the cusp of being irrevocably altered. Under the cloak of a stormy night in Fort Angel, the city transformed into an otherworldly landscape where familiar facades gave way to a dangerous kind of beauty. Abandoned galleries, with their peeling plaster and shadowed corners, became the clandestine playgrounds of night wanderers, and underground nightclubs pulsed with a mix of grit and unspoken promise. On this particular rainy evening, seeking refuge from the relentless downpour, I found myself drawn to the roof of an old building, a forgotten space above the city where the chaos below dimmed into a hushed murmur. I clutched my coat tighter against the lashing rain as I stepped onto the rooftop. The neon glow from distant streetlights and signs painted surreal patterns against the droplets cascading down, lending the night an air of forbidden intimacy. It was in this secluded refuge, isolated from the prying eyes of daytime Fort Angel, that destiny chose to play its audacious hand. As I stood there, the cold wind mingling with the remnants of summer warmth on my skin, a familiar presence drew near. Tyler, who had become an enigmatic fixture in my recent existence, emerged from the shadows like a living secret. Without a word, his eyes locked onto mine, a silent communication that spoke of urgency and desire. The world around us seemed to slow as he crossed the few feet that separated us. I could hear nothing but the rhythmic patter of rain and the distant hum of the city's heartbeat. In that fragile moment, our surroundings receded into mere background. The neon flicker, the damp chill of the air, and the gentle decay of the old roof became mere props in the unfolding drama of our encounter. Tyler's presence exuded both confidence and a measured vulnerability that defied the hardened exterior he sometimes presented. His hand reached out tentatively, the contact as light as the drizzle itself, and for a split second, time held its breath. Then, with a delicate audacity, his lips brushed against mine in a hesitant, electrifying kiss. It was as if every drop of rain, every stray neon ray, conspired to amplify the sensations coursing through me. That first kiss was a collision of emotions, a blend of anticipation and fear, of the warmth of newfound longing and the chill of self-conscious risk. I felt the softness of his lips, the subtle tremor in his breath, and the raw pulse of passion that defied all our prior restraints. In that suspended moment on the rain-soaked rooftop, the kiss was an act of rebellion as much as it was an intimate confession of desires long suppressed. It broke through the rigid constructs of my carefully controlled world, exposing the vulnerable spaces within me that yearned to be seen, understood, and ultimately liberated. The taste of rain, mingled with Tyler's unmistakable intensity, left an indelible mark, a promise of what might come, yet a daunting reminder of the forbidden nature of our connection. Even as we reluctantly parted, the echo of that kiss lingered in the charged silence, a tender yet perilous invitation to venture deeper into territories where duty and desire fought for dominion, and where every stolen embrace carried the weight of inevitable consequence. Daylight in Fort Angel came with an air of decorum and routine, a time when I could bury the chaos of my hidden nights beneath the polished mask of responsibility. Mornings found me in tailored suits and gentle smiles as I attended refined art exhibitions and elegant cocktail soirees. I was the perfect image of a loving wife to Brain, confident in his reliability and the social status our life afforded us. Yet beneath the gentle cadence of my daytime existence, a storm of unbridled passion and restless desire raged in secret. Nightfall became a gateway to an entirely different realm, one where every touch, every whispered word with Tyler, transformed the mundane into an intoxicating tableau of forbidden ecstasy. Our clandestine encounters unfolded in the most unexpected of places. A derelict warehouse repurposed into a haven for discarded dreams, an underground cafe lit only by flickering candlelight, and even in trendy bars where we shared the most intimate of confessions over a perfectly brewed ristretto. Every rendezvous was a delicate performance of risk and revelation, where the line between reality and fantasy blurred until it was nearly impossible to tell one from the other. In our stolen moments, Tyler and I discovered a language of glances and subtle caresses, each speaking volumes about the depths of longing that lay dormant in both of us. We discussed our wildest dreams and secret fears as if divulging confessions to an old friend, yet each word carried the weight of a dangerous truth. Our lives were splitting into two unmistakably distinct halves. By day, I was ensnared in social niceties and the expectations of a conventional life, but by night I found refuge in the embrace of a love that was raw, unpredictable, and utterly consuming. One particular evening stands out vividly in my memory. In the cozy confines of a modern art bar, over a cup of ristretto that burned with the intensity of our shared passion, we laid our souls bare. Every nervous laugh, every intense whisper, added layers to our secret existence. I could feel the intricate interplay of emotions stirring within me, as I realized that every flirtatious glance or subtle brush of our fingers in public was now laden with a potent mix of guilt and exhilaration. The more our two worlds collided, the more the boundaries between them began to disintegrate, leaving me teetering on the edge of a precipice where the next step could either lead to complete liberation or devastating collapse. In those rare minutes of unscripted intimacy, I began to understand that living a double life was not simply a matter of managing schedules or hiding passions. It was a profound transformation of the self, a metamorphosis that could never be reversed. With each encounter, the allure of forbidden love grew, drawing me deeper into a labyrinth of desire, conflict, and self-discovery that promised to change me forever. It was one of those rare evenings when the air in Fort Angel seemed charged with an electric mix of anticipation and foreboding. The night was cool, and the city lights shimmered with an almost surreal quality, reflecting off damp cobblestones as if each one held a secret. That evening, I found myself at a private literary soiree on a rooftop, a gathering that was meant to celebrate art and freedom, but which would soon transform into a stage for a revelation that threatened to shatter the delicate balance between my two worlds. The rooftop had been decorated with strings of soft lights and scattered candles, a transient constellation set against the urban skyline. Amid the murmurs of intellectual debates and the clink of wine glasses, I had drifted into an animated conversation with Tyler, a conversation that was charged with an intimacy that neither of us could fully hide. Tyler's voice carried an undercurrent of fervor as he questioned the boundaries of societal norms, challenging not only the conventional expectations but also the personal barricades I had so meticulously built over the years. I was in the midst of recounting the dreams I'd harbored for too long, a soul-stirring confession about my desire to break free from a life that had become too predictable, when a sudden, chilling interruption severed the fragile cocoon of our conversation. Brain, my dependable husband, had quietly stepped into the circle of whispered words. His presence, usually so composed and reliable, now radiated an intensity that bordered on devastation. His eyes, cold yet conflicted, locked onto mine. In that penetrating glance, every unspoken word between Tyler and me was rendered into a painful spotlight. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to congeal into a frozen tableau. The soft glow of the rooftop lights, the hushed murmurs of guests, and the rising tension coalesced into one unyielding moment of truth. Brain's voice, when it finally broke the silence, was trembling with suppressed emotion. "Iriki, what are you saying?" he demanded, each syllable weighted with disbelief and hurt. His tone was neither accusatory nor calm. It was a raw outpouring of betrayal, a question that sliced through the polite veneer of the evening. The betrayal was palpable. I felt like I was caught in a spotlight of my own making, forced to face the double life I had been living. I scrambled for words that could explain the intensity of my inner struggle, trying to reconcile the love I once knew with the yearning for something more. A rebellion against a life of quiet resignation. I attempted to justify the clandestine exchange as a search for truth, a desperate need to peel back the layers of certainty that had suffocated my spirit for too long. But every word felt like a betrayal against the promises I had once made, not only to Brain but to the version of myself that dared to hope for genuine passion. Tyler, standing a few steps away, was silent but no less culpable. His gaze was a mixture of defiance and regret, a wordless acknowledgement of the disruption his mere presence had wrought. The once charming symphony of our secret conversations now echoed with the cacophony of shattered trust. Brain's eyes, once warm and reassuring, burned with a hurt so deep it cut straight through the veneer of my existence. In that searing moment, I was forced to confront the unbearable truth. I was living a dual existence, each part pulling me in diametrically opposite directions. The conversation that ensued was a maelstrom of accusations, bitter regrets, and pleas for understanding. Brain's voice rose and fell in anguished declarations of betrayal, while I teetered on the brink of confessing my longing for an existence unfettered by the constraints of appearances. It was a confrontation that wasn't simply about an illicit kiss or a dangerous conversation. It was a soul-wrenching reckoning. I was being asked to choose between the stability of a life that had, for years, promised security and the tantalizing, dangerous allure of freedom that came wrapped in the mystery of Tyler's presence. That night, amid the bitter taste of regret and the overwhelming rush of emotion, the foundations of my carefully constructed life began to crack irreparably. Each accusation from Brain felt like a chisel striking at the very core of my identity, while every desperate explanation only deepened the chasm between the woman I once was and the person I was becoming. As the night advanced, the resolute clarity of that moment pressed upon me. I had reached a decisive juncture. I was no longer just a wife caught in the flow of a predictable life. I had evolved, though painfully, into someone torn between heart and duty, a soul desperately clinging to a freedom that came with its own staggering cost. In the weeks that followed our explosive confrontation, my life became a dramatic stage where daily existence was juxtaposed with secret nocturnal escapades, exposing a duality that felt increasingly unsustainable. By day, every social encounter was a carefully choreographed performance. At elite dinner parties and dazzling gallery openings, I donned the mask of refined sophistication while engaging in polite, shallow banter about the latest cultural trends. Publicly, I appeared graceful and composed, yet each interaction teetered on the brink of inner turmoil, as my mind constantly oscillated between the expected role of a dutiful wife and the allure of a hidden, rebellious self. One evening, during a lavish dinner at an esteemed restaurant set in one of Fort Angel's most storied mansions, I found myself surrounded by powerful patrons of art and commerce. The atmosphere was impeccably elegant. Crystal glasses clinked, and spirited debates about avant-garde installations filled the air. As I navigated through conversations on fashion and the fleeting nature of modern success, my inner turmoil simmered beneath the polished exterior. Across the table, the conversation circled back to recent art trends and political satire, while I struggled with an almost suffocating dissonance between what was expected of me and what I secretly craved. Later that week, on a private evening organized at an intimate theater tucked away behind an unassuming facade, I sensed that the lines between my two worlds were growing dangerously blurred. In the dim backstage corridors, where the ambience was as much theatrical as it was electric, I encountered Tyler once more. Our stolen glances had begun to acquire an almost ritualistic quality, a silent understanding that each brief encounter represented a rebellion against convention. In a brief pause, away from the conspiring eyes of an elite audience, we exchanged whispers and half-smiles that conveyed our shared disdain for the hypocrisy saturating our daytime lives. Even as these secret rendezvous deepened into moments that felt profoundly transformative, the cost of such liberation weighed heavily upon me. Each public appearance, despite its glamorous allure, began to taste increasingly bitter as hypocrisy permeated every handshake and courteous smile. I witnessed it in the way old friends, once bound by sincere affection, now altered their tone to match the fashionable narrative, dismissing genuine emotional expression as a relic of bygone eras. As the facade of propriety shifted and crumbled under its own superficial glitter, I could no longer ignore the silent screams of contradiction echoing around every meticulously planned event. In these contradictory worlds, I found myself engaged in a delicate dance between the promise of raw, unmediated passion and the burden of a life steeped in artifice. The more I embraced the hidden truths of my heart in secret, the further my public self felt chained by expectations. It became painfully apparent that the polished veneer of our ritualized lives was nothing more than an intricate web of pretenses, one that endangered our genuine desires with every forced smile and rehearsed conversation. Each evening, as the staged performances gave way to the unscripted intensity of clandestine meetings, the inevitable collision between the two realms grew ever more imminent, leaving me to wonder how long I could continue this charade before the rising hypocrisy consumed all that I had once believed in. The city of Fort Angel was alive with the spellbinding allure of its annual Evening of Lights festival, a grand celebration that transformed the urban landscape into a vibrant canvas of music, dance, and luminous street art. For one magical night, the boundaries between the public and the private blurred, and the entire city seemed to vibrate with unrestrained energy. Against this dynamic backdrop, the stage was set for an event that would unravel the precarious balance of my double life in ways I had never foreseen. The festival unfolded with an array of mesmerizing spectacles: impromptu street performances, neon projections on century-old buildings, and a contagious rhythm that beckoned even the most reserved souls to step into the spectacle. Amidst the revelry, crowds gathered around scattered stages where local artists and performers shared their most raw, authentic expressions. In that moment, I lost myself in the pulsating heartbeat of Fort Angel, fully immersing in the collective jubilation. Yet behind the innocent cheers and spontaneous laughter, an undercurrent of tension was building. A tension that hinted at secrets too long hidden, waiting to be exposed. While I wandered through the crowd, a familiar but unexpected presence drew my eyes. Tyler, always the enigma, had chosen this moment to orchestrate a daring public display of his clandestine emotions. In an act that was part performance art and part raw confession, he ascended a makeshift stage in the central square. There, beneath the luminescent glow of sparkling fairy lights and the hypnotic pulse of the music, he delivered a fervent monologue that resonated with both defiance and vulnerability. His voice rang out, unabashed and fearless, and his words appeared to touch on subjects that were as intimate as they were incendiary. The conflict between societal expectations and the yearning for authentic expression, the oppressive nature of secret lives, and the intrinsic human need to break free from the invisible chains of conformity. Tyler's speech, steeped in dramatic pauses and fervent rhetoric, captivated the entire audience. His message was simple yet jarring. He declared that the time for pretense had ended. As he spoke, every eye in the square was fixed on him, and every heart seemed to quicken its beat in anticipation of a truth too long suppressed. I stood at the fringes, my mind reeling, not only from the intensity of his performance but also from the realization that the public was now a willing spectator to the unveiling of our secret world. His words held an uncanny power, unearthing the buried emotions and forbidden desires that had defined the hidden corners of our lives. In that incandescent moment, it was clear that our carefully guarded truths were teetering on the brink of exposure. As Tyler's passionate plea for openness reached its climax, the air itself seemed to tremble with possibility and dread. The vibrant lights of the festival and the surging voices of the crowd provided an ironic counterpoint to the personal and perilous revelations unfolding on stage. My heart pounded in time with the rhythmic percussion of the festival's live band, each beat echoing the inevitable collision between my two worlds. Every word he uttered felt like a crack in the veneer of secrecy that had long shielded us from the scrutiny of society. For a brief, suspended second, I was caught between exhilaration and terror. Exhilaration at the potential for liberation, and terror at the awareness that there was no turning back once the truth was out. The entire square became a microcosm of the dual realities I had striven to balance. An outward celebration of life's brilliance intertwined with the dark, poignant narrative of forbidden love and shattered illusions. In that public moment, Tyler's performance did more than disrupt the festival's cheer. It unmasked the hypocrisy, challenged the rigid confines of social convention, and ignited a firestorm of introspection among the onlookers. And for me, it was a declaration that the intricate labyrinth of secrets and lies could no longer be contained. The boundaries between the carefully curated life I led and the raw, unfiltered emotions that surged beneath the surface had crumbled. The festival's brilliant lights were no longer a backdrop for celebration alone, but also a spotlight on the tangled mess of passions, betrayals, and truths that were destined to reshape everything I thought I knew about myself and the world around me. The aftermath of the public revelation left the air in Fort Angel thick with tension, a powder keg waiting for the spark that would ignite it. In the ensuing days, the delicate equilibrium between my two worlds began to crumble beneath a crushing weight of mistrust and betrayal. Word of Tyler's incendiary performance had spread like wildfire, mutating into an unrelenting scandal that tainted every corner of my existence. It was as if the entire city had become an arena where private transgressions were now fodder for public ridicule and self-serving agendas. The turning point came on a chilly evening at one of the city's trendiest art cafes. A modern minimalist space that housed murals by rising local artists and served as the unofficial meeting ground for the creative elite. The atmosphere was supposed to be one of inspiration and shared passion, but as soon as I arrived, the undercurrents of discord were unmistakable. Whispers filled the air like a low, threatening hum, and every cautious glance at me spoke of unspoken accusations and lingering resentment. In a dramatic display of calculated defiance, Brain had orchestrated an impromptu gathering of influential art and cultural connoisseurs, the exact same audience that had once admired our carefully curated facade. Under the pretense of discussing the latest avant-garde exhibit, Brain seized the opportunity to launch a public denouncement. His voice, sharp and tremulous with anger, sliced through the subdued murmur of the cafe. "Iriki," he proclaimed, his tone both sorrowful and scornful, "your betrayal is not just a personal failing, it's an act of selfishness against a community that believed in loyalty and integrity." His words echoed off the minimalist walls, each syllable reverberating like a gavel, condemning me to the role of a pariah in a society that prized appearances over authenticity. Tyler lingered at the periphery, his expression a tangled blend of defiance and helpless regret as Brain unspooled a litany of grievances before a rapt, yet judging, crowd. The once warm and inviting space had transformed into a stage for a brutal exhibition of moral grandstanding. Every accusing glance, every whispered comment among the attendees, further undermined the fragile alliance I'd sought to maintain between the person I was expected to be and the liberating, albeit destructive, truth that had set my heart aflame. In that charged moment, I stood engulfed in a vortex of conflicting emotions. Shame, fury, and a deep, almost primal desire to reclaim my dignity amid the chaos. Yet, even as I attempted to muster a defense, I realized that Brain's denunciation was less a call for accountability than it was a calculated move to assert control and preserve his own pride. His self-righteous tirade wasn't merely an honest outpouring of hurt. It was a declaration that his narrative would dominate, even if it meant forsaking the complexities of love and self-exploration in favor of a simpler, albeit hollow, righteousness. As the confrontation escalated, every interaction became a battlefield where each word threatened to inflict irreparable damage. Friends and onlookers, once sympathetic to the nuances of our secret lives, found themselves swept up in the fervor of moral judgment. The biting remarks and accusatory tones highlighted an unexpected truth. In the midst of our personal struggles, the selfish deeds of those around me, each act of betrayal born of wounded pride, had become an inescapable reality. The facade of mutual understanding crumbled, leaving behind a raw, unfiltered confrontation where every gesture was laden with the corrosive force of ego and self-interest. In that pivotal frigid moment, as I stood amidst the cacophony of conflicting voices, I grasped with agonizing clarity that my life, once shrouded in secret passion, had now become an arena where betrayal and selfishness reigned supreme, threatening to engulf all remnants of the love and truth I had ever known. A bitter winter's night set the stage for the final collision of our fractured worlds. The city streets were silenced by a heavy snowfall that muffled every sound, transforming Fort Angel into an unforgiving landscape of frozen despair. I wandered through the icy avenues, my breath visible in the air, weighed down by the burden of choices that had led me here. Every step was punctuated by the relentless beat of my heart, a heart torn between past promises and an unknown future. The bitter wind carried echoes of heated words and shattered expectations, propelling me toward a confrontation I could no longer avoid. That night, as fate would have it, destiny placed me on a dimly lit street corner, a place where the stark realities of my double life would come crashing together. Brain, his eyes ablaze with a mixture of anger and wounded pride, approached with a determined gait. Across the street, in a moment that felt surreal yet inevitable, Tyler emerged from the shadows like a phantom, his once passionate gaze now hardened by regret and self-preservation. The three of us stood there, an accidental trio encapsulating the entire tumult of betrayal and desire that had consumed us for months. Brain's voice broke the silence, a raw, accusing rumble that carried no pretense. "Iriki," he bellowed, his tone mingling sorrow with fury. "This ends tonight. I can't stand by while you continue to betray everything we once shared." His words slashed through the chilly air, each syllable a reminder of promises broken and trust eroded over time. I tried to explain, to justify the secret yearning that had driven me to seek solace in forbidden embraces, but my voice faltered under the weight of the moment. Each word felt like a confession, a surrender of the fragile autonomy I'd fought so hard to nurture. Then came the moment of final, irrevocable betrayal. Tyler, whose very presence had ignited the forbidden spark that both liberated and condemned me, stepped forward. His eyes, once alight with possibilities of raw, unfiltered passion, now shone with a cold determination. "I'm sorry, Iriki," he murmured, his words laced with a tragic resignation. "I never meant to lead you further into this chaos. But I can't stay. This life, this dangerous game, is my only chance at escape." In that single statement, his choice was made clear. In the heat of the unraveling conflict, he had chosen self-preservation over the shared dream of rebellion, leaving me to bear the full brunt of this bitter collision alone. The silence that followed was deafening. Brain's eyes gleamed with unshed tears and unspoken accusations, while I stood numb, caught between a past that no longer defined me and a future that promised pain and uncertain liberation. The icy wind seemed to whisper that there was no redemption here, only the stark reality of lives torn apart by choices made in moments of desperate passion. It was a moment of apocalyptic clarity. Both Brain and Tyler had abandoned me to the wreckage of my own making, leaving me isolated amid the relentless snowfall. In that shattering confrontation, the intricate tapestry of secrets and desires unraveled completely, exposing raw truth and irrevocable loss in one final, devastating act of betrayal.